January 30th, 1968. Saigon, South Vietnam. It's Tet, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year. A ceasefire is in effect. American soldiers are relaxed, celebrating. At 2:45 a.m., explosions rip through the night. Viet Cong commandos blow a hole in the wall of the U.S. Embassy and storm inside. Across South Vietnam, 80,000 fighters launch simultaneous attacks on over 100 cities. For 5 hours, Viet Cong fighters control parts of the American embassy, the symbol of U.S. power in Vietnam. American commanders will call it a military victory. They're right. Communist forces suffer catastrophic casualties. But back in America, millions watch the carnage on television, and they ask the question that will end the war. If we're winning, why does it look like we're losing? This is the story of the Vietnam War, a conflict that killed 58,000 Americans and over 3 million Vietnamese. A war that tore America apart and redefined what it means to lose. The French disaster Vietnam wasn't always America's war. For nearly a century, it was France's colony. When World War II ended in 1945, a Vietnamese communist named Ho Chi Minh declared independence. France wanted its colony back. And America, terrified of communist expansion, supported France. From 1946 to 1954, France fought a brutal colonial war. On May 7, 1954, at Dien Bien Phu, 50,000 Viet Minh fighters surrounded and destroyed a French garrison. The Viet Minh dragged artillery up mountains by hand and rained hell on the French below. After 57 days, France surrendered. The colonial empire in Indochina was finished. The Domino Theory. At the Geneva Conference in 1954, Vietnam was divided at the 17th parallel. North Vietnam under Ho Chi Minh. South Vietnam under Ngo Dinh Diem, a Catholic, anti-communist nationalist. Elections were supposed to reunify the country in 1956. The U.S. refused to hold them because everyone knew Ho Chi Minh would win. President Eisenhower explained U.S. policy with the Domino Theory. If Vietnam falls to communism, then Laos falls, Cambodia falls. Eventually, all of Southeast Asia falls like dominoes. So America began sending advisors to South Vietnam, not combat troops. Not yet. The descent by 1963, South Vietnam was a disaster. President Diem was a brutal dictator. Buddhist monks were setting themselves on fire in protest. The Viet Cong controlled large parts of the countryside. On November 1, 1963, with American approval, South Vietnamese generals murdered Diem in a coup. 3 weeks later, President Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon B. Johnson inherited a mess. He faced a choice: withdraw and let South Vietnam fall, or escalate. The lie that started a war. On August 2, 1964, the USS Maddox was attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. 2 days later, the Maddox reported another attack, except it probably never happened. Weather was terrible. Radar was malfunctioning. The captain wasn't sure they'd actually been attacked, but President Johnson had what he needed. On August 7th, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving the president authority to use military force without a declaration of war. The vote was nearly unanimous, 88-2 in the Senate. America was going to war based on an attack that probably never happened. The escalation. In March 1965, the first U.S. combat troops landed at Da Nang. By the end of 1965, 184,000 American troops. 1968, 536,000 troops. Each year, commanders promised victory was around the corner. Each year, they requested more troops, more bombs, more time. General Westmoreland developed attrition strategy. Kill more enemy soldiers than they can replace. Body counts became the measure of success. But there was a problem. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese weren't fighting a conventional war. They were fighting a revolutionary war. They didn't need to win battles. They just needed to survive, to outlast. Ho Chi Minh said, "You will kill 10 of our men, and we will kill 1 of yours. And in the end, it will be you who tire of it." The Viet Cong used guerrilla tactics, ambushes, booby traps, hit-and-run attacks. They hid in villages. They disappeared into tunnel networks 150 miles long. American strategy was search and destroy. Helicopters would fly into the jungle, find the enemy, kill them, leave. The iconic image: Huey helicopters, soldiers jumping into rice paddies, often straight into enemy fire. These operations would succeed, but the Viet Cong would return as soon as Americans left. The same villages would be fought over again and again. Operation Rolling Thunder began in 1965. The US dropped more bombs on Vietnam than in all of World War II. The goal: destroy North Vietnam's ability to fight and break their will. The result: it didn't work. North Vietnam had no large industrial base. Supply lines ran through the Ho Chi Minh Trail, jungle paths impossible to completely cut. When bridges were destroyed, they were rebuilt, and the bombing united the North Vietnamese people. It strengthened their will. For American soldiers, Vietnam was hell. The average age was 19, younger than any previous American war. Triple-digit heat. Jungle so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. They couldn't tell who the enemy was. Villagers who smiled during the day might plant mines at night. Booby traps were everywhere. Punji stakes, sharpened bamboo coated with feces, tripwires connected to grenades. Soldiers developed a dark mantra to cope: it don't mean nothing. On March 16, 1968, American soldiers entered the village of My Lai, believing it was a Viet Cong stronghold. They found mostly women, children, and elderly. No fighters, no weapons. Over 4 hours, American soldiers systematically murdered between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians. Women were raped. Families were gunned down. The massacre was covered up. It only became public in 1969. Lieutenant Calley, who ordered the killings, served 3.5 years under house arrest. How do you win hearts and minds when your soldiers are massacring civilians? Back home, the war was becoming unpopular, especially because of the draft. The poor and working class went. The wealthy found deferments. It was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. College campuses erupted in protests. Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? The country was tearing itself apart. By late 1967, the Johnson administration said the war was being won. Victory was in sight. Then came Tet. The shock. On January 30th, 1968, over 80,000 fighters attacked more than 100 cities simultaneously across South Vietnam. In Hue, it took 26 days of brutal combat to retake the city. Thousands of civilians died. The Tet Offensive was militarily a disaster for the communists. They suffered 45,000 killed. They failed to hold any major city. American commanders declared victory. But watching on television, it looked like defeat. The photo that changed the war. On February 1st, photographer Eddie Adams captured South Vietnamese General Nguyen Nguyen Loan executing a Viet Cong prisoner with a pistol shot to the head. Point blank. On camera. That single image turned American opinion against the war more than 1,000 speeches.
Cronkite's verdict. The most trusted man in America was CBS anchor Walter Cronkite. On February 27, 1968, after visiting Vietnam, Cronkite delivered an extraordinary editorial. The only realistic conclusion is stalemate. The only rational way out is to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who did the best they could. President Johnson reportedly said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America."
Johnson quits on March 31, 1968. President Johnson shocked everyone. "I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." The war had destroyed his presidency.
In November 1968, Richard Nixon was elected president with a promise that he had a secret plan to end the war. It took 4 more years and 20,000 more American deaths. Vietnamization. Nixon's strategy was Vietnamization. Withdraw American troops while training South Vietnamese forces to fight their own war. American troop levels declined from 475,000 in 1969 to 24,000 in 1972. But while troops withdrew, the bombing intensified. The secret war Nixon and Henry Kissinger expanded the war into Cambodia and Laos, secretly and illegally. Starting in 1969, Nixon ordered secret bombing in Cambodia. Over 14 months, the U.S. dropped 2.7 million tons of bombs. When it became public in 1970, campuses exploded. At Kent State University, National Guard troops killed 4 student protesters. The war was now killing Americans at home. The Pentagon Papers. In June 1971, the New York Times published the Pentagon Papers, a secret study revealing the government had systematically lied about the war for years. Presidents knew the war was unwinnable, but continued anyway. The Gulf of Tonkin incident had been exaggerated. The government had lied about everything. The Christmas bombing peace negotiations seemed close in October 1972. Kissinger declared, "Peace is at hand." Talks broke down in December. Nixon's response, Linebacker 2, the Christmas bombing. For 11 days, B-52s carpet-bombed Hanoi, over 20,000 tons of bombs. 15 B-52s were shot down. Hundreds of civilians died. The Paris Peace Accords. On January 27, 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. Ceasefire, U.S. withdrawal, return of POWs. But crucially, North Vietnamese troops could stay in South Vietnam. Everyone knew what this meant. The peace agreement was just a face-saving way for America to leave. Kissinger and Le Duc Tho won the Nobel Peace Prize. Le Duc Tho refused it, saying there was no real peace. He was right. For 2 years, South Vietnam hung on, barely. Then, in March 1975, North Vietnam launched its final offensive. The collapse. The South Vietnamese army collapsed almost immediately. Soldiers threw away their uniforms and fled. On April 29, 1975, with North Vietnamese tanks approaching Saigon, Operation Frequent Wind began, the largest helicopter evacuation in history. American helicopters landed on rooftops, evacuating Americans and South Vietnamese who had worked with the U.S. Desperate crowds surrounded the embassy, begging to be taken. The iconic photograph: Vietnamese people climbing a ladder to a helicopter on a rooftop, the symbol of America's defeat. Over 7,000 evacuated, thousands more left behind. April 30th, 1975. At 10:24 a.m., a North Vietnamese tank crashed through the gates of Saigon's presidential palace. A soldier ran inside and raised the Viet Cong flag. The Vietnam War was over. America's longest war had ended in defeat. The cost: American casualties, 58,220 killed, 304,000 wounded Vietnamese casualties, over 3 million dead. The U.S. dropped 7.5 million tons of bombs, more than twice the amount in all of World War II. Agent Orange poisoned millions. Birth defects continue today. The war cost over $168 billion. Over $1 trillion in today's money. How did the world's most powerful military lose? It wasn't a military defeat. America never lost a major battle. U.S. forces won virtually every engagement. The kill ratio was massively in America's favor. But winning battles didn't mean winning the war. The wrong kind of war. America prepared to fight World War III in Europe. Tanks, aircraft, conventional forces. Vietnam was a guerrilla war, a revolutionary war, a political war. American military might was largely irrelevant. You can't bomb an ideology. You can't kill every guerrilla. The enemy's advantages. North Vietnam had crucial advantages. They were fighting for their home. Every American eventually went home. Every Vietnamese was already home. Time was on their side. They could lose 10 soldiers for every American and still win, because Americans would tire of casualties. They had sanctuary in Laos and Cambodia. They had support from China and the Soviet Union. They understood the war was political, not just military. South Vietnam was a failed state. South Vietnam's government was corrupt, brutal, and unpopular. Its army was poorly led and unmotivated. You can't win when the government you're defending is illegitimate in the eyes of its own people. The American public wars are won when a nation has the will to fight. America lost that will. Television brought the war into living rooms every night. The draft made it personal. The lies destroyed trust. By 1970, most Americans thought the war was a mistake. By 1973, they just wanted out. The strategic contradiction to win required destroying Vietnam, massive bombing, invading the North, possibly nuclear weapons. But America was fighting to save Vietnam from communism. You can't save a country by destroying it. Years later, Henry Kissinger admitted, "We should never have been there in the first place." But that came too late for 58,000 Americans and 3 million Vietnamese. The Vietnam War didn't end in 1975. Its consequences continue today. American soldiers came home to a country that didn't want to acknowledge them. No victory parades, no heroes welcome. Many were spat on, called baby killers. They suffered from PTSD before we had a name for it. Approximately 150,000 Vietnam veterans have died by suicide since the war, more than twice the number killed in combat. After the communist victory, millions of South Vietnamese fled by boat. Conservative estimates, 200,000 to 400,000 died at sea. About 2 million Vietnamese refugees eventually resettled worldwide. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge murdered approximately 1.7 to 2 million Cambodians from 1975-1979, about 25% of the population. This genocide was partly a consequence of America's bombing, which destabilized Cambodia. Vietnam taught hard lessons. Military power has limits. Public support is essential for long wars. Understand your enemy. Question your government. They lie about wars. After Vietnam, America ended the draft and created a professional military. Was the Vietnam War worth it? 58,000 American lives? 3 million Vietnamese lives? A generation traumatized? The Domino Theory was wrong. Vietnam fell to communism, but Thailand didn't. Malaysia didn't. Today, Vietnam is communist in name but capitalist in practice. They manufacture iPhones and welcome American tourists. Everything America fought for seems irrelevant now. The Vietnam War was America's greatest foreign policy disaster, not just because America lost, but because the war should never have been fought in the first place. Final thought. On the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., a black granite wall lists 58,120 names. The wall doesn't say whether the war was right or wrong. It doesn't debate strategy or politics. It just lists the cost. And maybe that's the only lesson that matters. Some costs are too high, no matter what you're fighting for.